Welcome. I'm Susan Noyes, the founder and chief visionary officer of Make It Better Media Group, which includes Better in Chicago and the Bay Area, Marin Magazine, Spaces, and the Make It Better Foundation. Your time is precious. We are honored that you are sharing it with us today to learn from Dr. Nicholas Pearce, the Kellogg a professor who is quite an expert on leadership and diversity values and diversity, equity, inclusion, also known as DEI. The If you have any questions or thoughts, please share them at any time in the chat. Please know that a video of this event will be put in our YouTube channel and Make It Better Television. An article will be formatted, including Dr. Pearce's top line advice, and then featured in an upcoming Better Letter, which goes to 100,000 people, and throughout our social network. So that you will, if we don't address a question, or if you're watching this on YouTube and you have a question later, we can answer that too. Dr. Pearce is a globally recognized expert, as I said earlier, on organizational transformation, values-driven leadership, and diversity, equity, and inclusion. He is the Northwestern University Kellogg School of Management professor and is launching an important new executive education course next month called Beyond Diversity: Executive Strategies for Constructive Disruption. Dr. Pearce is also the author of The Purpose Path. He has written articles for Forbes and appeared on many television shows. And significantly, at least to me, Dr. Pearce strongly identifies himself as a husband, father, and son, and an apostolic Church of God assistant pastor too. I've experienced Dr. Pearce in the pulpit of my own church, Kenilworth Union, and I can confirm that his values, insights, and message are just what well-intentioned leaders in business, medicine, law, and other disciplines need right now. His course runs from June 21st to 24th in Weebolt Hole on Northwestern's beautiful downtown Chicago campus. You can find information about this and even enroll through the link in the chat. Impressive leaders from a wide range of sectors have already enrolled, proving that this topic is timely, demand for quality, actionable information is great, and the anticipated outcome for the enrolled leaders will be far more impactful than the usual executive education courses. Better is grateful for this opportunity to give our audience a sneak peek at the course through this fireside chat, and to encourage all potential leaders looking to become constructive disruptors as they make the world a better place and grow their careers and organizations to participate. And so now, at last, it is my great pleasure to welcome Dr. Pearce and finally let you hear directly from him about this complicated and compelling topic. Hello.
Hi, thank you so much for inviting me to join you today, Susan. It's a delight to be with you. How are you?
I am excellent. How are you?
Doing well, thank you.
So my first question is, did I get it right? The introduction, the description of the class. Is there anything else that you want to share?
First, I'm again delighted to be with you and those who are joining us today. I think you hit the nail on the head, as the saying goes, in terms of covering what this course will be. The Beyond Diversity Executive Strategies for Constructive Disruption program is the Kellogg School's inaugural and flagship DEI-focused executive education offering. And what makes this particular program so unique, in addition to the fact that it is held fully in person, is that the program is designed to not only touch on scientific insights and knowledge, but also practical strategies that can accelerate the impact potential of leaders and organizations of all kinds. And so we're really hoping that people who have real influence and power in their organizations, whatever they may be, will join us for this program. And we've already had a very, very strong enrollment to date. So there are just a few seats left. But what we're looking for is to have people who have the ability to make change in their organizations. A lot of people are talking about things and lamenting things, and there's a lot of hand wringing and all of that. We want to bring people in the room who have the ability to execute, to move the needle, so to speak, on the climate and practice of their organizations. And we're looking forward to sponsoring this program this summer.
So could you explain how this in-person experience will be more impactful for those who attend and what your strategy is?
Absolutely. We have learned a lot through this time of pandemic about how to deliver hybrid learning, how to deliver high quality virtual learning experiences. In fact, Kellogg Executive Education has been ranked best in class in terms of delivering virtual live stream content to our executive education participants. So we're quite proud of that. And at the same time, we do know that for some conversations, that airplane flight, that drive into a physical location can present a differentially more positive experience and also create something of a more intimate and safe environment for
Mhm.
people to explore difficult topics without the fear of being recorded or without the fear of having people disengage in the middle of their comment. We're going to have an in-person only experience, and we are very, very much looking forward to having not just a one-way download of information. This is not just a series of lectures. If it was just a series of lectures, Susan, we could record that and put them on YouTube. This is going to be an immersive experience. Every session will feature rich discussion, debate, conversation, uh, case studies, and other exercises that will immerse you in the topic from a number of dimensions, whether we're focusing on the individual and how we show up as our authentic selves, whether we're focusing on how we build cross-cultural agility and dexterity and how we collaborate across lines of difference, or whether we're talking about the organizational level, about how to build and design bias-free organizations, how to solve for systemic inequality and injustice, whether at the organizational level or even beyond. And some of these conversations have become so charged and so politicized, and there's so much polarization in the environment that we believe firmly that an in-person environment, especially for the executive audience that we are looking to engage, will provide just the right cocoon for this transformation to take place.
That makes perfect sense. I love the idea of the safe space and in a beautiful, inspiring space too.
That's great.
Can you talk a little bit about how to depoliticize DEI?
Sure. Our society, Susan, especially over the last decade, has become increasingly polarized.
Mhm.
Everything is either that extreme or the other. There is no middle ground. We have lost, I believe, the art of nuance. We have lost the ability to articulate multiple truths and hold them in tension. And that is certainly true of the DEI conversation. The reality, however, is that perhaps surprisingly, from the perspective of the science, the concept of diversity is not political at all. Diversity does not mean people of color. Diversity does not mean persons who identify as LGBTQI plus. Diversity does not mean persons with disabilities or women or veterans or people who are Muslim in their faith expression. Um, that's what it has become. Um, Many people think diversity is really a code word for deficiency, and
Mm.
that's not what diversity means. Diversity is simply a word that refers to human difference in the context of this conversation. Diversity proper simply speaks to difference. I imagine those of us who have been able to benefit from the advice of investment advisors over the years, especially in bumpy and volatile times like the current economy presents, we've asked, how do you weather recession? How do you weather inflation? How do you inflation proof your portfolio? How do you recession proof it? What do you do? for long-term success and sustainability. And the conventional wisdom is always to diversify your portfolio. A little bit of equity, a little bit of fixed income, maybe some cash, some domestic, some international exposure, and that diversity, maybe with a little bit of crypto or other alternative investments, tends to be the formula that people put on the table for investors. And people tend to understand that diversifying their portfolio will help them to weather some of the deepest downturns that the economy might present. And we accept that conventional wisdom in many cases, Susan, but when it comes to diversifying our teams and organizations as a way of de-risking our interactions, as a way of enhancing our effectiveness as collaborators, as a way of creating environments where everyone can be their best and bring their best and flourish, all of a sudden we have 50,000 reasons as to why that conventional wisdom is no longer appropriate. And so, simply when we think about diversity, it is a matter of human difference, and human difference is here to stay. It's not something that can be politically argued in this global marketplace where our economies and our politics and our cultures are so interconnected. Diversity is here to stay, and that's not a political statement. It's just a statement of fact.
No, when diversity is here to stay and it's celebrated by all, and I love, I'm imagining a beautiful garden full of, every kind of flower. I think that's the environment you're aspiring to, and it sounds ideal to me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Diversity, the heart of diversity, equity, and inclusion work is creating the conditions whereby everyone will have an equal opportunity to flourish.
Yes. So can you give a really concrete example of an exercise that you would lead your class through to help them, get on the same page with you?
Absolutely. Well, I don't want to give away all the
No, not
details.
all of them.
You do want to apply to join us for our June program so that you can see firsthand how our faculty will be leading the group through the learning experience. We have a number of first-rate faculty, not only myself, but we have a number of social psychologists, sociologists, and strategists who will be joining us from the Kellogg School. Even we have a political science colleague joining us from across the university. And every evening, we're going to have an executive scholar fireside chat, which is going to allow us to be in conversation not only with the faculty who are coming from the academic perspective, but we have an array of practitioners, CEOs, chief diversity officers, and others who are going to be able to provide that real-time perspective about how these beautiful ideas are actually showing up in the real world, quote unquote. But one exercise that we will do will involve looking at how to engage in the art of courageous conversations. And much as what we've been talking about today thus far, about how society is very polarized, how we've lost the ability to disagree with civility, and we've lost the art of nuance, having these courageous conversations is as much art as it is skill. And part of what we want to do is give our participants the opportunity to practice having some of these tough conversations. Susan, everyone's afraid of saying the wrong thing. People are afraid that if they say the wrong thing, they'll be misunderstood, they'll get judged, then they'll get canceled, and they will just felt like they were better off if they had said nothing at all. And for fear of saying the wrong thing, many people do say nothing at all. And at this point, saying nothing at all is not an option. So we're going to have some real practice time in one of our sessions, how you can start and maintain civil yet very courageous conversations. And the reason why we call them courageous conversations is because they do involve a degree of courage to have. And as the saying goes, courage is not the absence of fear, it's the mastery of fear. And so, what we're hoping to do is help our participants to approach these conversations with grace, with compassion, but also with clarity and courage.
Oh, that's beautiful. Who would not want to have that opportunity? And frankly, I know a lot of parents who could benefit from learning the art of courageous conversations too.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, this is a skill that is not only related to the diversity, equity, and inclusion space, it is a life skill. And that's why we are so thrilled that, as you mentioned, we are going to have executives from a number of sectors with us because these skills are so transferable. We will have people from the field of medicine, people from law, people from higher education, people from big tech, people from family-owned enterprises, and the list goes on. So there is no organizational setting, even the organizational setting of a complex family, where these skills can't be put to good use.
That is exactly right. And you also mentioned that you have people flying in from other countries, I believe, to attend to this.
That is correct. We are truly fortunate at the Kellogg School to have such a global reach as one of the top 5 business schools, arguably in the world, certainly in the country, if not the world. And because of that reputation and reach of a truly global institution, we recognize that we have the privilege and the responsibility to convene conversations of consequence that are global in scope. This is not a US only conversation. And it's important that those who will be joining us, those who are considering joining us, understand yes, race, yes, gender, yes, sexual orientation, yes, disability status are top of mind hot topics. But when you zoom out and you broaden the aperture to take a look at the state of the diversity, equity, and inclusion conversation globally, you'll find that in other countries, there may be different issues. In some countries, it's a Protestant Catholic divide, as you saw in Ireland. In other countries, there's a regional divide, those who live in the north of the country versus the south. In other countries, it's a colorism issue in terms of those who are darker skinned versus lighter skinned. Same ethnicity, different skin color. In some places, you have people dealing with questions of indigenous populations, which is a US issue as well, but it is even more top of mind in other countries. So we do have a global audience, we do have a global responsibility, and we're looking forward to having a global learning experience.
In an intimate setting. The cohort sounds fantastic. Just being part of that will be instructive for all.
That's right.
There's a buzzy term, intentionally anti-racist. I like this constructive disruption. What are some of the buzz phrases that are floating around, and how do you feel about those as a way of discussing these complex issues?
Sure. There are a lot of quote buzz phrases that sound good, but don't have a ton of substance to them. However, intentional anti-racism is not one of them. That is a phrase that has some significant substance behind it. Um, Many people will say, "I'm not racist. I've got a black neighbor," or my kid is in an interracial dating relationship. So trust me, we're not racist. But there is a difference between not being actively and intentionally prejudiced on racial grounds and being actively anti-racist.
Mhm.
Not being racist is often used as uh, please don't bother me. I'm not doing anything wrong. I'm not part of the problem. Being intentionally anti racist is making a decision to be part of the solution. And we recognize that simply not being an active part of the problem only perpetuates the status quo, which allows the problem to persist. Um, Being intentionally anti-racist is being aware not only at the individual level of your own biases and at the interpersonal level in terms of how those biases result in discriminatory behaviors and actions, but also taking a hard look at our structures, our organizations, the society's institutions, etc., to take a look at where racially disparate outcomes are taking place, whether in education, in economic development, access to capital, in terms of promotion and access to the C-suite, in terms of communities where health and human services needs are highest, where the quote social determinants of health, as they are called, are able to predict um, a 20 to 30 year discrepancy in life expectancy simply on the basis of zip code, these kinds of things that have a very clear racial underpinning to them in many of our environments, being anti-racist is working in such a way that the effects of racism are undone and that the playing field is truly level. And that is truly a life's work. It's a lot different than saying, oh, I'm not racially prejudiced or I didn't call someone out of their name or what have you, which is all wonderful. Like, I'm not suggesting that not being actively racist is bad. I'm simply suggesting that being anti racist is a step further. And that is indeed what these times are calling for, being anti racist, anti misogynist, etc. Not just allowing things to happen before you and saying, "Well, I'm not participating." This idea of being a passive bystander is something that we're having to work through as a society. We cannot claim impunity just because we did not actively contribute to the problem. If we're not actively contributing to the solution, our work is undone.
That makes great sense. I believe you've said that it's not enough just to be a good person. Can you? I have been part of organizations that have worked on and created mission statements around DEI. And then how do you take that mission statement and put it into practice, and how do you measure success? Could you address those steps, please?
Sure. This is something that we will also go into much greater depth on in our program. I do believe that human goodness and moral clarity and courage are quite important. There's no way around that. And we will talk about the role of moral clarity and courage with my colleague, Professor Adam Waits, as the program concludes. However, simply being a good person to yourself is not the same as taking courageous action. There's a lot that has been made of empathy, especially through the pandemic, understanding that people are going through difficult times.
Mm-hmm.
People are losing loved ones. People are separated from their families. People are missing graduations, and weddings have been postponed. And even those who lost loved ones, in some cases, weren't even able to funeralize their loved ones and had to bury them in private graveside services. I mean, it's just been a very taxing time. And empathy is very important for us to be able to understand the perspective and experiences of others that we may not share, to be able to take the perspective of another person whose shoes we have not walked in and perhaps aren't even familiar with is really important. However, empathy does not necessarily translate to action. Empathy causes me to feel the feels. So it's like, oh, well, Susan, my heart goes out to you.
Yes.
How challenging it must be to be you, how difficult the situation is. Oh my goodness, I feel for you. I may even try to feel with you, but that's not going to fix the pain or the trauma that you are experiencing. Part of what we need to be considering is not just empathy, but compassion. Compassion is when the heart that has been moved empathetically engages the mind to strategically think about what to do and courageously engages the hands to actually do the deeds, not just feel the feels. And so many of us, rightly so, are developing that muscle of empathy. I think it's super important. It is necessary. I would just argue it's not sufficient. Empathy without action is not complete.
It's not intentionally anti whatever it is that we're trying to be anti.
It's not anti or pro. Quite frankly, it's not anything. It is a feeling, and that feeling is important. I'm not in any way diminishing the importance of empathy as a skill that we can all develop to take the perspective of others. I think empathy is very important. But when it comes to this conversation, um, empathy is insufficient. I've spoken with many people like myself who are African American, many Asian colleagues and Pacific Islanders who, in the wake of the Asian hate crimes, received a lot of messages. Certainly, people in the Black community receiving a lot of messages in the wake of the murders of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud
Mhm.
Arbery and so many others. And there were so many expressions of empathy. One of my wife's friends called it the Atonement Olympics. There was a never ending stream of good people who were well meaning reaching out to say, we stand with you, we feel your pain. The question is, what will you actually do? How will you leverage the influence, the social capital you have? The power you have in your organization and your community, the political capital that you have. What levers will you pull? What buttons will you press? What policies will you examine? What practices will you take a hard look at and consider recasting? Those are the things that will make the greatest difference. Yes, people are very appreciative of thoughts and prayers and well wishes. But if my son and my children's children's children have to face the same issues that I have to face, your empathy did not translate into change. And while empathy, again, critically important, we have to ask ourselves what success looks like. And success in this regard is not perpetuating a status quo that is clearly not working. What success looks like is constructive disruption. And that's why we've called this program Executive Strategies for Constructive Disruption. People think that disruption is always negative, like tearing down, breaking stuff, like upsetting the apple cart in a very disruptive and negative, deleterious way. But what we're going to be talking about is the work of constructive disruption, how to build better than what was there before.
So many people in business think that disruption's terrific. That's what the next great idea is going to be. That's how entrepreneurs think.
That's
So
right.
constructive disruption sounds very appealing to me. And I loved the list of activities that you referenced. I sort of imagine class after class going through those, and they all sounded good. I think I also hear the preacher in you coming out. So it's from empathy to compassion to actions, and that's how we serve. It's through the actions, right?
No question about it. I make no apologies about the fact that as a person of faith, that my faith informs how I see the world. Um, I recognize that not everyone shares my faith tradition, not everyone shares my point of view, um, not everyone shares my experience, but at the same time, I can only be who I am. And I'm very clear that from my perspective, a God who loves all of us would be very interested in how we are all able to show that love one to another in the context of our daily living. And it's not just in our interactions in the grocery store, or in the bank, or in the country club, or in the parking lot, or wherever we may find ourselves. It's in taking a look at the structures and systems that govern so many of our interactions and so many of our outcomes as individuals and in our families and our communities, and saying, if I really love you, I'm going to do whatever I can to remove the barriers to your flourishing in the context of civil society. You should be able to live where you want. You should be able to shop where you want without fear of being followed around or profiled. You should be able to live in a safe community. Your kids should be able to go to a quality school. Yes, my neighborhood may have more of a property tax base than yours, but that doesn't mean my kids are more worthy of a quality education than yours. How can we address that? Like those kinds of things. That's love in action. And I do know that the scriptures say faith without works is dead. And so if you talk the talk, but don't walk the walk, that's an opportunity for growth.
I love it. I love the concept of everyone flourishing. That is something to hold on to and aspire to.
Absolutely.
Could you give some examples of workplaces that you think are doing it right now, and that you might guide conversations for others to go in that direction?
Yeah, this is a common question that we often receive, as you might imagine, Susan. Like, who's doing it right?
Yeah, exactly.
Can
Who's doing it right?
can we go borrow their blueprint? And the reality is that there's not one single organization doing all the things right. When we think about impact for organizations around diversity, equity, and inclusion, we think about it in three key areas. The first is workforce diversity. In other words, has the organization solved for the barriers that exist to people from all walks of life, from all backgrounds, being able to enter the organization? So, are the jobs being posted? Are the interviews bias free? Are the job descriptions bias free? Do we recruit in places where underrepresented talent can be found? Or are we just tapping our friends and neighbors on the shoulder saying, hey, it's the friends and family plan, come on in?
Mhm.
Those are workforce related questions. There are a lot of companies that are doing a great job in addressing their workforce diversity, but then some of them struggle in the second area, which is workplace inclusion. Workplace inclusion has to do with the culture and climate of the environment. Let's say you've got a very diverse organization in the junior ranks, but the senior ranks are relatively homogenous. That's an inclusion question. What are the barriers once I'm hired to actually being able to fully flourish and thrive in the context of the organization? What's preventing me from advancing? What's preventing me from being retained, developed? What are the challenges in terms of building relationships and trust in the organization? What barriers do I have to being able to navigate as me? Do I feel like I can belong? Or do I have to hide the real me and just kind of go along to get along? Those are workplace culture and inclusion questions. And some organizations are doing great at wonderful culture, but aren't doing so well in terms of attracting and hiring a diverse slate of candidates. And then still the third area is what we think of as the marketplace and community. Those are uh, questions that point to what's happening beyond the walls of the organization with our products, our services, with our engagement of our customers and clients, with our vendors and suppliers, with our marketing and advertising, with the community around us. Right. And so I'll give you an example so as to not completely kind of skirt the question of who's doing something we can emulate. Um, right. Let's take an example of like Ben and Jerry's. Ben and Jerry's, many of us are familiar with them as a premium ice cream company. But if you were to ask Ben and Jerry's, which I have, about their organization, they would say, we're not an ice cream company. We're a social impact company that happens to make really delicious ice cream. And so as you look at what Ben and Jerry's has done, they've taken some pretty controversial and courageous stands on social issues, alienated some people, excited others. But that's all in the area of marketplace and community. So they've done some things right in that regard. But then when you ask them about their workforce, um, they'll say, hey, we're in Vermont and we haven't done as well as we could in terms of having a diverse workforce, right? So would you say Ben and Jerry's is, quote, getting it right? Well, it's getting some things right, but perhaps missing on others. And there are countless other examples of organizations that may be doing one thing very well, but perhaps leaving some growth um, opportunity in others. So I would say there is no single organization that we would say follow them on all fronts, but there are a lot of organizations that are making a lot of great strides.
So I am fascinated with the concept of B corporations, which actually is a social impact certification process. Um, how how important is DEI in particular in acquiring that certification? And is that driving any progress from your perspective?
It's a great question. I am not intimately familiar with the process of what is required and what the criteria are to become a certified B Corporation. I do know that Ben and Jerry's is one, and there are many others that focus on these sorts of ESG principles, as they're called,
Mhm.
which include the concept of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Um, I would at the same time hasten to add that it is not necessary to become a B corporation in order to do DEI well. Um, Not every organization should become a B corporation. It's a particular organizational form that serves a particular purpose. But no matter what organizational form you are, LLC, C Corp, S Corp, nonprofit, partnership, B Corp, or even other forms that exist um, in other countries and in other areas of the world. The reality is you can still do well at diversity, equity, and inclusion because you have people, you have products or services, and you have a community within which you're situated, if not multiple communities. Um, this really gets at perhaps even more deeply than the B Corp conversation is what the purpose of the corporation, regardless of its form, is. And there are colleagues, Nobel laureates even, at a school on the other side of town, which we shall not name, that espouse a perspective, Susan, that the ultimate good of any corporation is simply to maximize shareholder value, to enrich the ownership class financially. And while maximizing shareholder value is something that I think a lot of us can support and get behind, there is a rising crop of CEOs who are saying, let's take a pause on that. It's not that we're trying to destroy shareholder value, but shareholder value is not the single holy grail around which an organization should organize its efforts. Um, Many organizations, and especially many of those that are um, led by CEOs who participate in the business roundtable, they've issued a statement
That's
declaring that
right.
the purpose of the corporation is to maximize stakeholder value, not just shareholder value. And maximizing stakeholder value includes customers and clients, communities, employees, supply chain partners, and shareholders. And so, if we're really going to think about maximizing stakeholder value, we got to think about how we do that in an inclusive and equitable and just way.
Amen. I have seen so many studies that have come up from several of the investment banks in Chicago of the businesses that started here and then understood that they needed to invest in the community. They were serving not just the shareholders, but all of the people and all of them, their supply chain, et cetera. They have been more successful financially in the long run. I've seen that
Correct.
those stats over and over again.
That's right. And just a quick word about corporate philanthropy, which is really amazing. And I want to encourage more of it. But let's also be clear, it's got to be about more than the t-shirts and the coach buses and the photo ops. It's got to
Mhm.
be about sustainable investment to change lives, to change outcomes. Activities are one thing, impact is another. And if we're going to spend $10,000 on t-shirts and coach buses to parachute into disenfranchised communities, disinvested areas, so that we can do our good for a few hours and then we parachute out until next year, that is a limiting approach. What we're
Mhm.
seeing many organizations do with great impact is embedding themselves within community over a longer term period. Like you mentioned, financial services. If every financial services institution adopted a neighborhood, right, and said, we're going to take the financial acumen that we have as part of our business. Like we're going to take what we know. We're not going to send the investment bankers out to go clean up a school and paint walls. Maybe they know how to do that, maybe they don't. But what we do know they know how to do is banking. All right, let's stick with that. If the banking institutions each adopted a neighborhood and said, we're going to embed ourselves with the families in this community, the kids in the schools in this community. We're going to invest in them. We're going to make sure they all have bank accounts. We're going to teach them how the stock market works, right? Things of that sort, where you're actually able to have a longitudinal impact that will have life changing implications to break cycles of poverty and dependence. That kind of knowledge philanthropy has even greater impact than parachuting in for the photo op and writing a big check and then walking away.
Oh, I completely agree. I also aspire to get all of the organizations, philanthropists who are interested in investing in a community and even have invested in a community together around one big table to talk about what each one of them does well and divvy it up and collaborate and invest more strategically that way. I'm fairly confident that a spectacular amount of money and good intentions have gone into Inglewood, and yet we haven't seen the impact that we should have.
I agree. I agree. Collaboration is hard, Susan. And your vision that you just articulated underscores how impactful a collaborative approach would be. But getting people to agree, even in the philanthropic class, about how to engage in philanthropy that is truly anchored in love of people, which is what philanthropy means, not just in terms of love for appearing busy
Mm-hmm.
or we've got to give away X percent of our endowment, otherwise we can't be a foundation anymore. Um, Not looking at communities and nonprofit leaders as those poor people who need our funds, but looking at them as people, fellow humans alongside whom you can partner to enable and accelerate full flourishing and thriving.
Collaboration is a terrific constructive disruptor. And the internet actually makes that easier than ever. I think communities form around that, knowledge is shared. And I am hopeful that these good ideas will accelerate because of the tech possibilities.
That's right. Technology is definitely a great tool. In some cases, it can accelerate this impact, as you mentioned. In other cases, where there is high, high level of distrust, um, technology may not always provide the easiest pathway to establishing that trust. Once trust is established through proximity and consistency, then technology can be a great tool to sustain a relationship. But oftentimes, technology is a very challenging tool to use to build trust, especially when there have been breaches of trust in the past or where people are naturally inclined towards skepticism. And isn't our society, if nothing else, full of skeptics? We don't know what to believe, who to believe. People are saying there's no such thing as truth anymore. It's your truth, it's my truth, it's alternative facts, it's fake news. We don't know where to go, who to trust. And so it's really difficult to build that kind of trust um, online as an initial effort. It's not impossible, but there are significant hurdles to overcome. And so I think technology makes for a great tool, a terrible master, though.
And bringing it right back to the conversation at the start, all the more reason to sign up for your in-person class in a safe space to dig deep into what effective solutions and better workplace environments so that more people can flourish look like. And then we can use technology to share the knowledge widely.
That's right. That's right. Technology does a great job to be able to amplify our reach, to be able to connect those who are otherwise not able to join in-person spaces for whatever reason. I mean, technology is fabulous. And for those of us who are longing to return to the glory days, um, whatever those were, 2019 is not coming back.
Yeah.
However, there are some human connecting essentials that are still true. And one of those is that, in some regards, meeting people in 3D, as I like to call it, face to face, allows you to connect in a much more enriching and intimate fashion than an only online mediated existence.
And we are grateful that the world is evolving so it feels safer to meet in person.
That's right. That's right. And yet, as we continue to move toward greater in-person interaction, we still have opportunities to gather together like this, right? The platform that you and your team here, Susan, have established is a technologically mediated one, and that allows for an amplification of impact and reach. So it doesn't have to be tech or in person. In many regards, there will be a confluence of both tech and in person. Our particular program is going to be anchored with in-person elements, but I wouldn't be surprised if as we continue to evolve this, that we don't keep our global community connected using technological means once they've already established in-person connectivity and trust.
That is our hope. I anticipate that there's going to be great wisdom to be shared more broadly, and I hope that Better has the opportunity to help share that and connect you more widely too.
Awesome.
Dr. Pearce, this has been a fantastic conversation. I'm so very grateful. I am intrigued by this class. I encourage everyone to sign up, and I look forward to hearing the outcome of it. Anything else you want to tell our audience?
Oh, thank you once again, Susan, for convening this conversation and to your entire team at Better. I would say for those who are interested in participating, learning more, visit our website. It's KELL.GG/Beyond Diversity. That's KELL.GG/Beyond Diversity. And for more information, to register, visit that website and encourage those leaders around you to consider joining. We are encouraging teams to come because we recognize that while individual leaders can make amazing impact, that most often major strides in organizational life are done collaboratively, as we've discussed.
No.
And so we are encouraging you to bring a colleague or your manager or your CEO along with you, or if you are the CEO, maybe bring your board chair or bring one of your direct reports, so that you all can accelerate your ability to make impact beyond the time that you're with us at Kellogg.
How could anyone say no to that? Thank you so much. This has been a great conversation. Again, the video will go out. The highlights of our conversation will be featured in an article. We will keep, encouraging our audience to participate, and we look forward to hearing from you and learning more, following up from the class too.
Excellent.
This is a dialogue, a very important one.
Absolutely. Glad that we're connected, Susan. Thank you again for inviting us to join you, and looking forward to meeting some members of the Better community. If you're planning to join the program and you learned about it here with our conversation with Susan, note that in your application so that we can make sure to let Susan and the team know that you connected with us through this platform.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of your day.
You
And
too.
thanks for
Be
your
well.
time. Bye-bye.
Be well. Stay safe. Bye-bye.